Hello, today is Sunday, 3rd of January 2021. So, kind of a beginning of the next 10 years of our lives. And I thought I'll make a video trying to, predict what is going to happen with us, not over the next year, but over like the next 10 years, right? So, I made myself a cup of tea. I got some gingerbreads. And, I thought I'd sit down and have a chat with myself and a camera. Right, well, one of the predictions is I might grow a beard. Not sure about it yet, but I'll keep it for a while. Right, so what's the next thing that's gonna happen over the next few years? We're very likely to see an American president who is gonna die of an old age while giving a speech over the next couple of years. I mean, whether they go with Trump, whether they go with Biden, they have people there so old that their sand is running out, right? Nowhere to say that, they see so old you can see the sand coming out of him. While at some point of time during giving a speech, the sand is just gonna run out, and the entire remainder of their body is gonna collapse onto themselves. That's a very likely outcome, right? So, what's gonna happen more? Well, we're probably gonna have a year or two of them trying to keep us in our houses because of yet another pandemic and yet another pandemic and yet another pandemic. I don't know how much it lasts, but if you have been single before this pandemic, if you're a guy and you have been single before this pandemic, and you're gonna just make an effort of going out when they allow you to do it, you are gonna get laid. It's pretty much guaranteed. But, is there more good news on this side? Well, not really. What we already seen started, especially like this year, it's already been happening kind of more obviously since more better known people started to pass away, is what we will see is the baby boomer generation finally starting to go, right? Whether we like it or not, whether we'd like our grandmas and grandpas and great grandmas and great grandpas to keep staying with us, but that is inevitable, right? We know we did extend our life expectancy from about 60 years, right? Thanks to the advances that were made over the 70s, 80s, some in the 90s. We have extended our lifespan from about 50, 60 years to about 90, 100. Right, so now the chickens come into roost, so people are starting to pass away. So what we will see is that the world population is gonna actually start to shrink. And you don't have to believe me on that one. All you have to do is look at Japan. Right, their population has actually shrunk by a few million over the last few years. Why does this happen? Is that the baby boomer population, so the people that were born straight after the war and a few years in, right, they are starting to go, right? But over the last good, let's say 20, 30 years already, we had a tendency, like a huge tendency towards much, much smaller families. So essentially many people having only 2 kids. At the moment we're probably gonna have around 30 to 40% of my age population, which is around 30 something, 40 years old, who have had no kids whatsoever. And we're not talking just about guys, we're talking about women. Plenty of women who have never had kids, and they in their 35, 36, 7, 8. You know, they're already writing about this in magazines, how women in their 45, she wants to have her final stint and make an ability to have a kid because she never had any, right? But that keeps on happening, so we literally have had around 30 years where we were not reproducing at high enough rate. So which means that once the baby boomers go and the generation after them goes, because the baby boomers were probably the last generation which would had enough children to have actually maintained the numbers that they had produced themselves, right? So that was the last generation. The following generations have had less and less kids. So as the baby boomers, which have been obviously, lasting a lot longer than they used to, so now they increasingly start to go, and that generation of their children, which are like in their 60s 70s now, they starting to go, we will see the decline of the population. So look out for this one. In the next 10 years we're probably gonna drop by about 1 million, maybe more. So if you were looking for that pay rise, or like going up in your company, going to a more better position, or the position which you wanted to have but you couldn't have because there was a guy sitting there who's like in his like late 60s 70s 80s, and he just wouldn't fuck off because he didn't pay enough for his pension, didn't save enough to keep his pension. Well, now there's your chance. So what we'll see is that kind of change of generations. We're also going to see the change of generations in the parliaments. So again, I've recently probably made a video, but probably did it in Ukrainian, where the parliament in Ukraine, for example, is probably one of the youngest parliaments in Europe, if not the world, where the average age is about 45, 48, compared to US, where the average age is 68, 70, and UK, which is the average age is around 60, So you're gonna see that change, and we don't know how the politics are gonna change on that one. So again, quite a few things that might happen, which might be quite interesting, but we'll see. But definitely look out for your rent getting a bit cheaper as well. An unfortunate result of the population actually shrinking. There's going to be some interesting, I believe, developments in technologies, right? So obviously we all talk about the new age of drones, new age of robots, which are gonna replace people in lots of production, lots of delivery jobs, lots of jobs where, beforehand having the opposite thumb was actually a thing to have. Now it's increasingly changing, and increasingly more roles are going to be replacing humans by robots, and they're already trying to do in Amazon and stuff like this, and more robots which are coming out which kind of help us to think in the same way as humans did. So it's gonna happen, so many jobs are gonna be lost. And again, probably not such a bad thing, since there's gonna be a lot less people to replace the ones which are there now. Okay? And we're gonna look into politics. Obviously the Brexit has happened, so we're gonna see the next 10 years of a shitstorm with Brexit. I mean, it took them 5 years to not even be able to agree a proper like exit strategy. So UK is gonna have its fun. I know people talk about maybe UK uniting with the Commonwealth countries, and again, maybe an interesting idea, but I think many people will not want to unite with England, kind of in charge. So more and more international trade is going to be happening between countries actually uniting and removing the trade blocks overall. At least we're talking about the so-called first world countries. We're also going to see the rise of the level of life in the poorer countries, and that is simply going off the back of a statement by a guy called Stalin. And when he was talking about the socialist countries, he said that the socialist country cannot survive, the socialist way of thinking cannot survive in one country alone unless it encompasses, well, a big number of countries, and there's a possible trade going on, but possible other things going on. And maybe he meant it for wrong reasons, but it's actually still stands. Most of the European country are one way or the other have like a lot of socialism in them. US in its own right, you know, the school meals in US where poor people can get meals from schools to feed their kids. Few other programs in there are way more socialist than ever in many poorer countries where there's like just wild capitalism. So what we'll see is with the introduction of robots, what we're gonna see is more and more countries going like, hey, we're gonna get more socialists, we're gonna start, like for example, with the pandemic right now, where in Germany, for example, even if you are not a German citizen, but you have worked in Germany and lost your job during the Corona crisis, they would not put you on unemployment. They would just say, look, here's a form, you fill it out, this is a Corona crisis, you get like a basic minimum income. We're also looking at, for example, Netherlands, where there's some cities which already have a basic minimum income for people who live there, independently whether they're citizens of the country or not. If they have lived and worked in the city over a year, you get the basic minimum income. Okay? And this thing cannot be supported unless it's universal. Universal basic minimum income only works if it is universal, if it's not limited to a single country or to a single city. Okay, like I said, personally, I've made a video myself saying that, yeah, I really like the idea, unless we have some other universal controls and universal implementations like rent control, things like this. So just to stop the chase of like, hey, we give you so much, and then as soon as we give you, like, you know, we raise your basic minimum income at this, we announced that in beginning of December that next year the basic minimum income is going to be 1,000 euros, and then obviously which goes up, let's say, by 200 euros from 800 euros, for example. And then obviously within the next 2 weeks you get a letter of happiness from your landlord that your actual rent is going up by pretty much the same amount a month. So unless those issues are universally resolved, having the basic minimum income is just going to mean that people from poorer countries where they're less protected, they're going to keep on trying to get into the countries, and it's still going to keep getting the system off balance. And so we will see that expanding over the surrounding European countries, countries surrounding Europe, and increasingly moving into the other countries. If people don't think that universal basic minimum income is gonna work, well, let's be honest, even in US right now they're kind of disputing this thing, and many people say, hey, the Trump didn't actually give enough of the basic minimum income to unemployed, which way he originally wanted to give them like $2,000 a month, and he then cut it in half. Well, he should have stuck to his guns, and now they're having this argument. They are making it a part of a political ball game, but they have no choice. Like with so many people simply being put out of work because they try to save the oldest part of the population, people who, to be honest, 30 years ago we wouldn't expect them to live that long. Yes, we love them, they're great, but nevertheless, you know, and trying to save that group of people, they basically displaced the made people unemployed, unable to care about themselves and their families. Probably with the numbers of people that are displaced like this are probably higher than the numbers of people that they are trying to save, which is not even guaranteed that those people are gonna suffer from corona or any other similar disease to the level, to the extent that they will pass away or actually have any serious consequences. It's a fact of life, right? But the universal basic minimum income, for whichever reason it's coming, right? They will find a way to put it in for whichever reason they come up with it. But we're looking at this happening around Europe and increasingly gonna be happening around Europe. So we're gonna see it coming over to US, and not sure when it's gonna come over to England, since England is in a bit of a deep shit hole. But they will have to find ways of making it work. One of the ways, personally, I was actually reading it some time ago. I think it will happen. That's my personal opinion. Is what will happen is that they will change the ways also how you pay taxes. So you will get basic minimum income, right? Which means that they will remove any other like benefits like this unless you are a disabled person. So they will be only receive you're only gonna receive disability benefits if you're actually disabled. But they will remove the kids money, they will remove anything like this, unemployment benefit, all of that is going to be removed. And what will happen is that you will get, so if you have a kid, you will get the basic minimum income for the kid, like you're probably not going to get it all. What you, if they do in a smart way, and I hope they do, is what will happen is you will receive a part of that benefit. So about, let's say, 60% of it, and 40% of that benefit is going to go into a bank account for your kid to have when they become 18, so they can move out, so they can do, like, I don't know, pay for university or pay to move to a different country if you're such a nice parent, so they will want to run away from you and never talk to you again. So good parenting is going to be important, people. But yeah, that's probably how it's going to work. What you will also see is that you will not get taxed on your wages or in the lower tier. So basically, if you get in your basic minimum income, right, you will, as you start earning money, right, you will probably, this will not be removed. So that's the thing which is going to encourage people to go to work, is that until also a certain level, let's say until you make over like €1,000 a month, you will not be getting taxed, you will not be taxed. So basically having a job, like having a 20-hour job, is gonna make sense for you, because you will be getting, like, all of a sudden you're getting an extra €1,000 or dollars on top of your basic minimum income, right? You're not starting to pay tax, for example, until your total earnings, so we're talking total, your income and your wages, go up to, let's say, €2,000, and only for anything that you earn over €2,000 you receive in your, once your total income. So we're talking, even if you have investments, you get income from your investments or anything else like this, well, you're not gonna be getting charged any tax unless your income goes above €2,000 per month. right? Obviously, if somebody's interested in something like this, I can probably dig it up how I thought it was gonna be, but that's it's gonna work. So this is the way to encourage people to not stay on a minimum income. Unfortunately, at the moment, what we're seeing in many countries, the system is like this. If you stay unemployed, you're getting so much money, right? If you get yourself a job, they start cutting your money straight away. Basically, you end up in a situation quite often, if you are on a minimum job, like minimum wage job, like you decided to, like, I don't know, work in McDonald's, you get minimum wage. And what happens that as soon as you start getting paid, they start removing your support. So if you're doing 20 hours a week, they remove your support for that amount of money. So basically, and what happens is you end up going to work, having all the expenses while actually getting, quite often, to be honest, less money than you would if you stayed unemployed. So quite often the minimum wage is lower than the benefits you get for your unemployment. As a result, you see, like, people, obviously there's plenty of people who simply lose the self-respect, so they do want to go back to work and they're willing to lose that little bit of benefits. Unfortunately, it doesn't work when you have kids, when you have, mouths to feed. And if you go to a job and you lose your child benefit and some other benefit, which means that your entire income is actually dying out. Now that is gonna start changing. I mean, it's slowly paying attention to this. I know, for example, in UK they're trying to go the different way, which is basically we're gonna give you as little as possible, and if you have to go starve, beg, and kill someone to get your money, we don't give a shit. Get yourself a minimum wage job, which doesn't feed your family anyway. But we're gonna try and push you out into that, but unfortunately it doesn't work. Again, very much like basic minimum income, so does a minimum wage. Has a problem. As soon as the government announces that, hey, we're raising the minimum wage by another 20 cents, well, your landlord sends you a letter of happiness that's saying that, hey, your rent is going up. So does the business owner that runs unless they own the actual building they're in, they're getting letters of happiness that, hey, your rent is going up, then your bills are going up, and essentially any raises to your minimum wage are wiped out immediately, right? Quite often actually it does more damage, because the compound raise of costs of living, which comes from, for example, just landlords telling to all the businesses, sorry guys, but we know that the minimum wage has gone up, so you can afford to pay more for rent. Means that businesses end up spending more, and then your prices as well go up, and quite often they go up by same or higher percentage than your actual minimum wage has gone up. So you basically, over the period of, let's say, last 15 years, for example, that I have been in England, lived in UK, the minimum wage had lost about 30% in value at least. Right? That's from what I have seen. Probably more. Right? Although the numbers have increased, but the value has dropped so much that I believe in 2012, the gentleman who was probably a bit earlier, because at that time the minimum wage in UK has been around just under £6. The gentleman who actually designed the minimum wage and his team, they've said that, look, at that time the minimum wage had to be double of what it was at the time, so which is about £6. So it had to be like over £12 just to keep up with the level of life that the wage was allowing at the time when it was designed and put in place. So, like I say, the wage has lost quite a bit of value. Same's gonna happen with basic minimum income, but I think that people are gonna start noticing this over the next few years, and that's gonna start changing. So we already touched a little bit on technology. So let's see and think what is gonna happen with technology. Let me try. Might be hot. It's quite nice. If you don't mind, I'm gonna have some gingerbread. So, what are the hottest technologies for the next 10 years? And I know many people talk about green energy, and it's a good idea. I really love the idea. There is a very interesting thing, the research which has been actually confirmed that about 100 square kilometers over Sahara Desert or some other deserts could actually produce all the energy needs only by collecting solar energy of an entire planet. Right, so we're talking, like I say, a few places in the world could actually produce enough energy to run us entire planet just by simply collecting solar. Right now we have in lots of different sources except solar, and the biggest issue of the green energy is not actually getting the energy, it's the storage and transportation of energy. Right, and I know many people thinking about that, look, we have to invest into battery power. The battery power is going to develop, and it's going to develop for, I believe, for smaller applications, so like small drones, or like some robots that have to have like usage of light power, your mobile phones and things like this. So what's gonna happen for the big storage, and what's gonna happen for the transportation of energy, right? That is the question. And I know that like people like Tesla, they say, hey, we're gonna make really big batteries. The problem with these batteries is that they are actually still quite bad for the environment. You still then end up having to rework them to dispose of them, like once they have finished their run, that's it. Another thing is they are quite expensive. They are getting cheaper, but they're still going to be quite expensive, and they have a very limited time span. So 5-6 years, a few more recharging, and that's it, they're dead. On the other hand, the issue, for example, they have like in California, where at the peak hours they produce so much energy they have to give it to the neighboring state for free, because they have nowhere to put it, nowhere to store it, and they can't really transport it for overly long distances. So they can send it to a nearby state, but that state can, like after a certain distance, the energy tends to lose its density and lose its usefulness when it's run over the wires. So is there any good interesting technologies which gonna solve this issue, and probably many others? Well, there is actually. It has been around for a while, but recently they started kind of looking at it again, and they've started doing this in Germany. They're running already some tests, and I believe that the next big thing is hydrogen. Yes, so basically what they're doing is they're taking big energy stations like, green power, the wind turbines and things like this, and instead of saying that, hey, we're gonna drop this electricity that they produce straight into the system, and then when it peaks, well, so be it, we find some way to get rid of it. When we have more, then we still have like our coal whatever stations. Well, they're making a research about using electrolysis, I believe. Might be using the wrong term, but basically there is a way of getting hydrogen by running electricity through water, right? So what you get water, you get hydrogen, oxygen, whatever else is in the water, you can put it back into the sea. Actually, it's not going to hurt the ocean because it's something that has been taken out of the ocean or the river or something else like this. But what you do is you use hydrogen then, and you can store hydrogen as a normal gas. You can transport it through pipes, and the transporting of the gas through pipes means that the energy which has been stored in this hydrogen remains constant, right? So this is one of the advantages of having a gas in the pipe over the current running through your wires, where your current runs through your wires. At a certain point of time, it just loses its density because the electrons still escape the wires. So they made it better, but after certain distances, after certain levels, it's just gets away. And also you have no really good ways of storing it. Even if you build gigawatt batteries, those batteries, like I said, they're overpriced and they have a limited period of usage, whereas the gas storage you can use indefinitely, right? A little shortcoming of hydrogen is that it's not as energy dense as, for example, petrol is, or the gas that you get from the ground. So from that normal gas that we use at the moment, it's not as energy dense. They say it's about like 30-40% less energy dense. But on the other level, like I say, you have your electricity, you put it in the hydrogen, you can store it for as long as you want. It's not going to go off, it's not gonna spoil. It's because it's in the storage area, you can use it in existing infrastructure as well, which is good. So you can have the modern power stations, right? You have to adjust them, obviously you have to change a few things, but I don't think it's such a big changes. And you can use hydrogen to produce electricity as and when required, and all you're gonna have out of it is essentially water, right? So one other way of doing it is probably gonna be what they will start doing is, once they do this electrolysis on the water, they will also collect oxygen, I hope so. And what they will do is they will use oxygen like to make the burning process more intense rather than normal air. So again, it's a bit of a change to the way we're doing things, but I think this is gonna be the key technology over the next 10 years or so. It's up and coming, people don't pay enough attention to that, but I believe that that's where the green future lies. And it also means that, to be honest, we're not gonna have to start like what many people in UK and even in US are complaining that, look, we have to put our energy, like the green energy things, in the fields. It also damages the wildlife, or you have to put them in the sea somewhere, like it costs quite a bit of money to put them there. But because of the non-permanent way of the winds blowing, things like this, you have peak powers, you have under powers, and you still have to maintain other ways of producing electricity, and quite often it actually ends up hurting the environment quite a bit more. So what we'll see is, I believe, like this use of hydrogen is going to start being more widespread over the next 10 years. Like probably we take 3-4 years before people start paying attention, but I hope it will happen sooner, and they will start using hydrogen in the normal gas stations. Like I say, small adjustments and you have a system which does not require us to rebuild our entire infrastructure. We already have pipelines. Okay, we might have to put more pipelines to transport hydrogen from like wherever it's being produced, But overall, like I say, it's a green thing. Like even if if your hydrogen pipe blows up and there is a fire there, it's not throwing out CO2 in the atmosphere. It's actually just producing lots of water vapor. As a matter of fact, I do believe that hydrogen is gonna start probably replacing petrol in the cars. And again, for the same reason, like it's not as energy, if like it does not produce as much energy as the petrol in when it burns into your engine, but all it gives out is water vapor, right? So and then your car, which used to be like 300 horsepower, now it's 150 horsepower, but it still drives pretty much as almost as much as normal car. So small adjustments, right? So you're gonna have to change a tank for the gas and things like this, but small adjustments would mean essentially green, not entirely green, but a vehicle which produces only water vapor as its exhaust. Something to consider. I don't know how it will deal with diesel engines and how things are gonna go there, but we're gonna wait and see. And again, we're gonna see that in these areas, keeping the old design model instead of the batteries, which are then very hard to get rid of. But obviously things have their own advantages and disadvantages, but we might see that all the vehicles will get changed from petrol to hydrogen. Right? On diesel, I don't know. I'm not good enough in that system, but I think it's probably possible as well. Maybe not, because it's the way it works, but I'm gonna leave it to the scientists, but we'll see that kind of changing. Talking about vehicles, right? At the moment, we have more and more cities saying, look, we only want green vehicles, no more petrol vehicle sales and things like this. One thing I think is just gonna happen in the next, I wouldn't say couple of years, but in the next 5-6 years, people will start getting a point that it doesn't matter whether your vehicle runs off electricity, even if the electricity is all green energy, or whether it runs on petrol. What matters is the size and the weight of your vehicle. So what we will see is the tendency towards decreasing the sizes and weights of the vehicle which are allowed to run around our cities. Right, so at the moment, like I said, we can have somebody driving around in a 3-ton dick extension, right, because he's got the money and whatever, or because he wants like a big truck to drive him around. Instead, because he wants a great acceleration from 0 to 100 in 3.2 seconds. He never uses it, but he has it, right? So I really think that in the next few years, the controls on the vehicles is not going to be like, they kind of start stepping away from whether it's a petrol vehicle, whether it's a battery powered vehicle. What they will do is they will start looking at the weight of the vehicle. Like, so how much does your transport weigh? Like, look, you don't need a car which weighs 2 tons to get your kids to school. Right? All you need is the car which weighs 500 kilos, made out of modern materials, quite often reused plastics. The only the limitations of the size are going to be also a weight, is also going to be the limitation of a maximum speed. But to be honest, most of the people don't really go around the city above the average speed of 20 kilometers an hour. Like seriously, I live in the area where I live. The difference is like to get into the city center, it takes you nearly an hour. The distance is less than 20 kilometers because of the lights, because of everything else. So if your average speed drops to 15 kilometers an hour, you ain't gonna notice. So what we will see is that kind of change where inner city travel is going to be limited only to a smaller vehicles, lighter vehicles, the ones which don't accelerate as fast and obviously do not carry so much weight that if they hit you, they kill you. Even at 20 kilometers an hour, 3 tons of metal hits you, you go flying. At 20 kilometers an hour, if you get hit by a much lighter vehicle, let's say if he's just 500 kilograms and the entire body is made of softer plastics, you will go flying, but you ain't gonna go dying. Okay, so it might hurt you, but it's not gonna hurt you as much, especially if it only goes, like I say, at 20-30 kilometers an hour. You don't really need a lot more in the city. So people are gonna start noticing that, right? You don't need a super cool acceleration. You want a super cool acceleration? Go off to Nürburgring. It's a great place for acceleration, right? Go to the racetrack, right? So we will have that kind of a disposal of the car industry, where it will have the top tier models still available, but they will probably not gonna be something you buy. They will be something you rent for a weekend or something like this. Or if you want to travel between cities, you're probably gonna go like to the edge of your city in your nice little car or on the train or something like this. You're gonna get there and you're gonna go, hey, can I rent this kind of nice fancy car because I've never driven Ferrari in my life, right? Instead of like, say, having to this big chunk of metal sitting on your driveway and then polluting the area. The biggest, again, the most dangerous pollution the cars produce in the city as well, why I do think that the weight is going to be more limited, is not actually the exhaust. Also, it's the thing, although it's the thing that stinks the most, but the most dangerous pollution that you get from the cars is the rubber dust, right? So from the brake pads and from your tires. Each car produces like 100 grams of plus of rubber dust simply driving around the town, right? From all the 4 tires on a normal car. We're not talking about buses, we're not talking about trucks, it's just a normal car. And probably a few more grams. So if you live in a city which has like 3 million vehicles, right? I say we're looking at a few tons of minor rubber dust, which is an oil-based product which you breathe in. It goes in your lungs. This is the one that does the damage, like, because the exhaust, yes, it's there, but it evaporates and it gets blown away. The rubber dust stays for a while. It gets picked up each time the car drives past you. It picks up the dust, throws it in the air. That's the thing you breathe in. The fact that we already have 10, 12-year-old kids in bigger cities dying from lung cancer, where their family never smoked, where they never smoked, obviously, and having a lung cancer, right, at so early age is literally down to the fact that we're breathing a lot of oil-based products in. So that's your micro products. This is your microparticles that get washed into the sea and everything else. And the only way to beat that is to have lighter vehicles which produce less of those parts as well. So lighter vehicles, less rubber dust, your kid not dying from lung cancer. Nice and pretty much simple, right? What we will see as well is, again, more plastic getting recycled. not so much as just put away somewhere and then shoved it in some bin and just waited there, but because of the, I believe that the result of there being more things which are going to be longer lasting plastic, like I say, lighter cars, the use of plastics in those, the more drones which are going to be produced, and again those are made out of plastic. What we will hopefully see is that those big plastic dumps are gonna get recycled, not the way they do it in Sweden by simply burning shit instead of oil, but by actually collecting it and then finding ways of recycling it and making it into other plastics which can be used in the items which, like large items, like they already do. Lots of some plastic parts in the many cars are made out of recycled plastic. So similar things gonna happen, only on a bigger scale. So what else haven't I talked about? Okay, cool. A little bit more, well, good or bad news, I don't know, but coming back to politics, obviously we talked about Europe, so things like this, but I believe that in the next 10 years what we will see is a fall of Russia. Right? So again, this is something to look out for, because at the moment they don't really have another leader that is going to be able to take over the country. Maybe they have somebody who's hidden in there, but what we really see is a complete, well, the disaster in the so-called elites of Russia. They simply continue falling further and further and further and further. And as well, we can see lots of motions in areas of Russia which are away from Moscow, where people kind of starting to push for their independence, and those are younger people, younger generation, who simply see that a lot of stuff they produce, a lot of things that are made in there, they end up kind of benefiting Moscow but not benefiting the areas they live in. So that's gonna happen. So the Russia is gonna fail. This also comes as a bad news to Ukraine, because before they do, there will be a last ditch attempt to unite the country. So the most obvious target for that is going to be another war, and it's going to be the war with Ukraine. Right? So they will try, it's going to be their last way of keeping themselves in power. They will fail, but nevertheless Ukraine is going to be under some rather aggressive attacks in the next couple of years, because Russians don't have any other choice. Right? Might not be a full-on invasion, but it will be like actions by special troops and things like this to try and encourage the big issues in Ukraine. They will probably use the local insurgency as well, and that is going to be like a place to watch. I don't think this gonna influence the refugee situation very badly, because Ukrainians kind of probably gonna fight it, most likely gonna fight it back, but it will bring quite a bit of instability, obviously, in European region. What will bring more refugee issues and quite high instability is, after this attempt on Ukraine is going to finish, Russia is going to start collapsing, right? And that is going to be not very nice. Okay, so again, at the moment the Russians are surviving by essentially raping their own country, right? So at some point of time I pointed out, for example, where they used to have forests, for example, now there is essentially flatlands which are bigger than the size of most of Europe. So they've destroying their forests. Usually it's done by selling them off to China. So it's China taking part in that. And I think that China is gonna try and play the kind of capture a bit of the territories there. I mean, they nearly destroyed those territories anyway. So we're gonna see quite a bit. This is also gonna lead to quite a bit of ecological disasters. So like the destruction of forests, the outright insurgency wars in there, forest fires, which happened in Russia just last summer, not this one, at least this week summer they didn't seem to report on them, but last summer they happened. Right, so all those things, it's not gonna be nice, and we don't know where it's gonna go, but a very likely result is gonna be that again a big loss of grip on the controlling China, right? Especially with the current situation where many companies are pulling out of China because they have lost their grip on reality, right? But they have a big economic bubble going on in China in the hopes of the companies staying on. But the result is them trying to play into put politics into business, right, and not in a nice way. What we'll see is that more and more companies are gonna pull out of China. So we've already seen Apple pulling a lot of its production into India, especially considering that a lot of production is dependent on the South Korean manufacturer of chips, which means that they're not really dependent on China. More and more companies have moved their production to cheaper areas in India, South Pacific. They already starting to move to Africa. Simply the journey time from Africa to Europe or to US, to certain areas of US, is actually shorter as well, so that helps. Like I say, with the new technologies in energy like hydrogen and things like this, we will see probably a bit of a rise, more money going into Africa as well, because it just makes sense to use these unpopulated areas to, especially which have access to water, large water quantities like oceans or some sea or like something like this, right? And using those areas to produce the energy with the least impact on the nature, and then use the pipes to just bring hydrogen into Europe. US probably gonna try and do similar things where the lots of energy production is gonna be around small towns or areas where it's least impacting on people and the environment, and then just use that electricity to produce hydrogen and bring it into existing energy system, right? It's going to be a cheaper option than drilling for gas and oil, which does not remove gas and oil. Let me just have a drink. Which does not remove gas and oil from the equation, actually, because we still need plastics, we still need rubber, we still need many other things. We might find natural replacement for those. Somewhere recently I've read that some flowers could be used to produce something, to produce rubber, like natural rubber and things like this. But nevertheless, we're still gonna need oil products. It's just that we'll see the less intensity on the oil products requirements. So what will this give us? Well, actually it will give us the fact that, again, like I said, it will decrease the influence of Russia, for example. It's becoming very actually more, it becomes more expensive to drill for oil in Russia than it is to even drill for oil in Ukraine, where there's not very much of it, right? The Russian oil and gas become more expensive than even, what's this called, the one where the new popular one where they drill things through That's becoming cheaper than gas and oil from Russia, right? Okay, if I remember the word, I'll say it. We're gonna have, but the oil is not gonna lose its influence. It's just gonna be a different type of use. So it's actually gonna be good for many oil countries too, because it would mean that although overall they will probably lose some immediate income from oil, they will have their oil reserves last for longer. So it's not going to be as intensive, but the oil reserves means that they're going to last for longer. So for example, Saudi Arabia has enough oil to last for 60, 70 years, while it will last for 120 years. So it gives the country some leeway in moving from some industries to others. Okay, changing the way obviously the people take care about environment is on the bill as well. It will have to change because all the talk about the global warming and stuff like this, without working with very, very, very serious particulars, like I said, for example, the heavier cars which produce more micro rubber, which influences your health on daily basis, the replacement of petrol engine with something which is equivalently simple to continue using. So like I said, introduction of hydrogen into the system on a greater level and in simpler systems. So instead of trying to invent some magical thing which is going to be 100% perfect, they're going to start saying, hey, we're happy with an imperfect solution but which works here and now, right? But also, I've actually talked about this in some other video, but we'll see that we're gonna have to start looking out for replanting. They already started doing it a bit, but it's not a big thing. And stopping the destruction and increasing the replanting of forests. As an example, I can tell you that, like I said a bit earlier on, in Russia they have actually chopped down and burned the equivalent amount of forests which could cover Europe, or most of it. Okay, so this is billions of trees. Each tree holds at least 50 liters, just a tree trunk, not the entire tree. There's obviously a root system, but just a tree trunk holds at least on average 50 liters of water, right? And obviously as the trees are being removed and no new trees are grown, all this water goes back into circulation. That's what you get your extra water, more water hitting the oceans. This is where you get your addition to desalination, which has been produced by melting of the icebergs as well. So the full on, I say full on impact of something like this is far greater than extra 2 degrees of the temperature. Give you an example as well, Ukraine, where I'm originally from, they have cut down huge amounts of forests in Carpathian Mountains, not far from the border from Europe. So this means that that area consistently suffering from flash flooding pretty much every spring. As a result, the taxpayer is forced to pay for rebuilding of the roads, rebuilding of the infrastructure, repairing of the infrastructure, helping people who suffered from the flash floods. And not only in Ukraine, but obviously surrounding areas probably suffer from that too. So we are gonna have to start looking, and we will start looking at these kind of predatory practices by companies who use wood or other natural resources. Another great example is that there's tons of trees have been cut up just to provide the extra green crowd who doesn't want to eat meat and butter and stuff like this. They want some green alternative to all this stuff, so they use palm oil for their skincare and for everything else, Well, the palm oil is produced by simply cutting down millions of palm trees. Just because these rich cunts are incapable of thinking and don't really give a shit about what happens to the areas where millions of trees are cut down every year, well, we're gonna have to start thinking about it, because the knock-on effect is gonna start impacting us. I mean, people who will probably first scream fire is gonna be Netherlands, literally because their flood protections are gonna be starting to fail pretty soon. And this is a European country who is mostly based under the sea level. So once we start losing places like Netherlands, places like Venice, I think Europeans are gonna start getting shit and taking shit a little bit more seriously, as well as lots of areas around US, because as the water raises by another half a meter, we're talking about huge areas of US also being flooded. And the lack of trees also leads to, like I said, higher count of CO2, obviously warmer climate, but also a lot higher levels of ocean waters. This also leads to the to more unsalted, so desalinization of oceans, which also influences the way the currents walk, obviously. As far as I remember the movie, was it 2012 or something like that? No, not 2012. Day After Tomorrow. Yeah, they had a very good idea there about how the change in the structure of water might actually change the way the currents walk and the energy they do, and obviously how they balance out our climates. We're already noticing it by high number of hurricanes and things like this. So again, like, just talking about global warming without paying attention to particulars, I think with the influence from people who are kind of struggling to believe in global warming but still see the issues happening, I think we kind of start requiring better action. So in the next 10 years, I'm hoping, I'm not saying it will definitely happen, but I'm hoping that is what's gonna happen. Alright, so that's kind of my overall future predictions. I mean, I've talked for an hour. I could probably think up some other things and they will all be legit, but I think those are the major ones to look out for. Right? If somebody's interested in knowing something more particular, any particular subjects, feel free to write a comment. Feel free to hit a like button, subscribe if you want to. Right, like I say, and I'll try and answer things as they come and go, or some other thoughts come into my mind. I also put them out there. I say I'm not expecting to make any money from these videos, but if they help someone, thank you very much, and let me know. Okay, goodbye, take care.